Welcome to Inside Drug Discovery. This video covers a new drug, KOMZIFTI, which was recently approved by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. This video, as always, describes mostly the medicinal chemistry aspects of the drug rather than patient outcomes. KOMZIFTI was approved on November 13th of 2025. KOMZIFTI is approved for the treatment of refractory or relapsed acute myeloid leukemia, AML, in adult patients with mutations in the NPM1 gene. KOMZIFTI's active pharmaceutical ingredient is ziftomenib. The drug is administered orally once per day in a 600 milligram dose. The sponsor for the NDA is Kura Oncology. A link to the prescribing information insert of KOMZIFTI is shown on this slide as well as in the video description. KOMZIFTI is indicated in patients with mutations in the NPM1 gene, which encodes for nucleophosmin. Nucleophosmin is a protein that plays a number of critical roles in cells. In its mutant form, nucleophosmin binds a protein complex that can form in the nucleus, the menin-MLL1 complex. The collective complex of menin, MLL1, and nucleophosmin then acts to increase the expression of genes associated with AML. MLL stands for mixed lineage leukemia. NPM1 mutations are found in approximately a third of AML patients. KOMZIFTI is a member of a newly named drug class, the menin inhibitors. Menin inhibitors block the formation of the menin-MLL1 complex. So, no menin-MLL1 complex means no downstream effects from nucleophosmin. Menin inhibitors, because they inhibit the binding of one protein, menin, to another, MLL1, are examples of protein-protein interaction inhibitors, or PPI inhibitors. Not so long ago, maybe 20 years ago, the idea of a drug that targets a PPI was something of a holy grail. They still are not common, but a few examples of such drugs have now made it into the marketplace. The IC50 of ziftomenib, KOMZIFTI's API, on the displacement of MLL from menin is sub 50 nanomolar, according to IUPhar's Guide to Pharmacology. The physical chemical properties of ziftomenib are shown on the screen. These are calculated by Swiss ADME, which is a very useful online resource. What pops out to me is that ziftomenib has two Lipinski violations: molecular weight and hydrogen bond acceptors. Now I get it. Many people could not care less about Lipinski's rules, but I admit I'm a bit of a fan. Anyway, according to Lipinski's rules, compounds with more than one violation, 1 and 2, should have poor membrane permeability and therefore have low bioavailability. That's potentially a problem because ziftomenib is orally administered. Clearly, ziftomenib works as an oral drug, or else it would not be approved. I am regardless very interested to see what the bioavailability is for ziftomenib. About a month ago, I made a video about another oral drug, Linquit, with 3 violations. That's right, 3 violations that had an oral bioavailability of 52%. I was shocked at that compound. Still, I would expect the bioavailability of ziftomenib to be on the lower end of the scale. Enough anticipation. Let's see the next slide. Here are the key PK properties. Let's go straight to the 4th row. The oral bioavailability is 12.9%. Okay, that's kind of what I would expect. That is a low bioavailability, but clearly the scientists at Kura were able to work with this value and still achieve adequate exposure for efficacy. Going back to the top of the table, the half-life is exceptionally long for an oral drug, over 90 hours. The volume of distribution is also quite high. Ziftomenib undergoes hepatic metabolism through CYP3A metabolism. Based on the long half-life, the rate of metabolism must be quite low. In fact, if you look at the excretion, the drug is mostly excreted via the feces and it is largely unchanged. I would consider this to be interesting behavior for a small molecule drug. KOMZIFTI does carry safety concerns. The warnings include differentiation syndrome, which is a severe inflammatory response similar to a cytokine storm. This warning is in a box on this slide because this risk itself is a boxed warning on the KOMZIFTI packaging. Other warnings include QTc interval prolongation, which is a cardiovascular risk, and embryo-fetal toxicity. The prescribing information lists a number of adverse reactions. The list on this slide is not complete and somewhat condensed. In at least 20% of patients were observed GI tract effects, elevated infection risks, fatigue and edema, among others. And at least 10% of patients experienced lab abnormalities such as elevated ALT and AST levels. That concludes the NDA approval of KOMZIFTI, which was announced by the U.S. FDA on November 13th of 2025. KOMZIFTI contains ziftomenib as its active pharmaceutical ingredient. KOMZIFTI is approved for the treatment of certain types of acute myeloid leukemia. As always, your comments and input are welcome. Please like or subscribe. Take care.